Hello, and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. My guest tonight is Zamauri Jones. Hey, Zamauri.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Zamauri. I guess I'm somewhat known for the Dealing Stan Instagram page. Posting Steely Dan oriented content, and the Dan Vault YouTube channel. Just cool, rare clips and audio recordings and whatnot. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I was really surprised to see sort of the young face behind the account. I first realized, how young you were, if you don't mind me saying, when you were a guest on Steely Phil's podcast. And, up until then, I thought Dealing Stan was like an old guy like me. So it's really cool and really refreshing to see how, not only the generation behind me, but the one behind them, are really getting into Steely Dan and yacht rock and Zappa, Like Your Hat and all these other sort of classic bands. So tell me a bit about, how you first came across Steely Dan and some of the other music that you're into.
It's really just just a matter of me being interested in it. It's just my taste for the most part. But I will say my godfather, he really has spurred my interest in some of this stuff. Like, whenever I, spend time with him, he's always playing, tons of old, classic things, from different genres too, rock, soul, R&B, etc. But yeah, I'm just really interested in it. I guess it's somewhat natural, just my natural music taste.
And are you a musician at all? Do you play instruments and, are you inclined that way?
Yeah, I play piano and I technically play saxophone and accordion, but I'm not nearly as good on those as I am on, piano. So
what are some of your favorite things to play on the different instruments? Good or not?
Whatever for the most part, like on accordion, for example, I was learning the Godfather theme. That was like a year ago or so, and I, revisited it here and there. But I just kind of, I don't know, I'm just kind of impulsive when it comes to getting instruments or just doing different things. So I just hop from side to side.
Same. I started out in the third grade taking guitar lessons. As you can see behind me, I'm still into it that many years later. But I was always trying to find something else, as like a musical outlet. So fifth grade, we were able to take more advanced instruments, when I was in school. So I picked up the saxophone and played that for a while, all the way, through my teenage years, I guess. And I've stuck with the guitar ever since, but I'm always, and then I learned bass a little bit and a little bit of keyboards. But I've been the same way. Like I'm always just trying to find something new to play or to sort of figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played sax. I played alto sax in sixth grade, and then I switched to tenor in seventh, and I played that until my senior year of high school. But, I never really practiced, so I was pretty, shoddy at it. But piano, I've been, that's for sure like the instrument I'm most proficient at, and the one I just enjoy the most too,
Piano is so foundational, I think, for other instruments.
Oh, yeah.
If you can play the piano, it just helps you think musically more so than, it's one thing I wish I had focused on. I took piano lessons for a summer when I was a kid and I hated it. So, I quit, and that's how I ended up doing saxophone after the guitar thing kind of, was still going on. But, if you can read music, if you can get both of your hands working at the same time, I find that lends itself to so many other things.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I honestly wish I took piano lessons because I've just, watched YouTube. That's all I've done for the last, several years. Just, I guess, somewhat self-taught, But I do wish I had like an actual teacher when I was younger, because I would be a lot more advanced than I am now, you know. But
Well, it's
I
never
think
too
I'm
late.
sufficient though. You know, I'm at you know, kind of a stable enough stage. You know, I can kind of get around certain tunes and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, I think just that sufficiency, and YouTube is, I wish I had YouTube when I was a kid. you know, it was like, sheet music and trying to figure out things by ear and listening to a song and trying to play it back, and it was hard. But my daughter, who's 18, taught herself so many songs just by watching YouTube, not just tutorials, but playing the actual song and sort of picking out some notes, and then she'd get to a section where she couldn't figure it out, or there were chords that she wanted to figure out, how the chords worked, and she would just pull up a YouTube tutorial and bang away at it for a few hours, and then I'd come up to check on her and she'd play me a song, and I was just like, wow. So YouTube's a great tool. I mean, you find so much stuff. And speaking of YouTube, how did you get this inkling to start the Dan Vault channel? And I'm not asking you to divulge your sources, but how the hell are you finding all this stuff? I mean, you've uncovered some rare gems.
Well, okay. So to answer your first question, it first started because my friend Oscar, we talk online, we kind of connected over the Dan and whatnot. He actually came up with the idea. He was like, "Hey, we should start a YouTube channel." Cause, for like the first year of me running my Instagram page, I would post like all the cool things I find just in full length on Instagram. And, that's not as, practical as posting it on YouTube. So he came up with the idea, and, we just started the YouTube channel. And yeah, it's weird because at first I was kind of like, I don't really think we should start a channel, but like since starting it, I think it's really, I guess somewhat beneficial and, more accessible than having to like scroll through an Instagram feed to find different things. But yeah, in terms of sources, it really just varies. I found a lot of stuff on Facebook, just searching deep through the web, an embarrassing amount of hours, just looking at the Steely Dan content. And then there's been like a handful of things that people have like emailed me or, sent me and stuff. But really almost like, I would say like 98% of the stuff I post has been, just stuff I've happened to found on my own. Yeah, it's weird because like lots of people have asked me like where I find stuff, but like it's really just a matter of just searching, or not even necessarily knowing where to search, but just searching for an extensive amount of time, but yeah.
Yeah, I think when you get on the trail of something and you're deep into searching stuff on Google, the things that surface are just amazing that you wouldn't think in like the darkest corners of the internet. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've also tried to find some things, like before the sort of unofficial second arrangement release last summer. There was rumor that somebody, had a copy of some version of it hiding, somewhere on a website, but it wasn't really public anymore, but the website was still up. So I was trying all these different things to try to like back into finding the pages, and, couldn't get there obviously, but it's crazy. And I feel like there's so much material that's still sitting in somebody's bedroom, right?
Oh
Like in a
yeah,
shoebox
yeah,
someplace, like
yeah.
tapes and pictures. And Simsy Nichols has been just like, I know she's busy trying to launch a whole new business right now, but I'm hoping she gets back to, what she was working on recently, which was scanning all of her father's film and photos from the Steely Dan days, because apparently there's just like this treasure trove of pictures of not only, Donald and Walter, but the rest of the band and everybody else. So I'm just hoping that as time goes on and, maybe before I die, all this stuff will come to light, or
No, yeah, I think for certain we'll see a lot of, um, rarities in your lifetime. So I don't think you have to worry about, dying. Yeah, but yeah, Simpsy, she's been amazing, like last year, 2023 was like crazy. We saw a
Yes.
lot of things. I mean, the Schlitz song, several dozen pictures that are, were pretty cool. I mean, the several videos she uploaded to YouTube, showing the studio stuff. I mean, that one with Roger and Donald walking around through the woods and stuff. I mean, come on.
Yes, that was amazing.
I mean, yeah, she's great though. She's contributed a lot to the community overall.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get her to come on the podcast as soon as she's got some free cycles. But
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to help her out with some of the interviews that she was doing. So I sat in on Gary Katz and Denny Diaz, and I had to pinch myself. I mean, it was like, it was just unreal. And the whole thing started because when she was doing the live stream of playing the second arrangement for the first time on YouTube, there was somebody kept like comment bombing her and sort of trying to take over the feed. Yeah. So she was asking in real time on the stream, like, hey, does anybody know how to do YouTube moderation? I want to see if we can get somebody to kick this guy off. And I wasn't really a YouTube moderator, but I raised my hand and I was like, well, I'm a tech guy. I kind of know how to do stuff like that. Like, give me mod rights and I'll see if I can figure out how to block them. So I did. And it was me and another person. It was one of the Jive Miguels. I don't think it was Instagram Jive Miguel. I think it was Discord Jive Miguel. So many Jive Miguels. And between the two of us, I think we were keeping this person relatively out of the stream. So afterwards I was just chatting with Simsy and she was like, hey, if you're into it, I would love to, maybe ask you to help in future streams and, help figure out some of this tech stuff. And, I'm going to try a new platform and do some testing. And I was like, I'll do anything you want. Right. Because it was just so cool to be able to be that close to some of the Steely Dan world. So it was just great. It was absolutely an amazing summer all the way around.
Yeah, and I remember thinking that when I would see you on the videos, because I think I watched the Gary Katz one, the Skunk one, and some of the Denny Dias one. But I was like, damn, like I wish I was Chad right now. This is, I mean, come on.
I haven't heard those words too many times, but yeah.
I mean, but how did that feel though? That must have been just like surreal.
I was nervous as hell. I'm not going to lie. You would think I was sitting in the room with like, I don't know, the Queen of England. I mean, not that I would want to meet the Queen of England, but you know what I mean? Like to me, these people were royalty, right? So it was like, I was super nervous. But Gary Katz could not have been a sweeter person. He is so nice, totally unassuming. And same with Denny. Denny is just the most laid back, chill person you would ever want to talk to. And, I didn't get a chance to really talk to them one-on-one, even though I was kind of behind the scenes in the stream, but just being on camera and, asking questions and helping sort of moderate the conversation. It went by so fast because I was like, didn't really believe it was happening. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a similar thing when I saw the Dan for the first time. Like it was a great experience, but like it was weird how surreal it felt just seeing Donald come out on stage, and because I was sitting in the balcony too, so I wasn't like extremely up close, but still just like seeing like his presence in person. It's because I'm so used to seeing him on my phone or, on YouTube clips and stuff. But yeah, before I knew it, the concert was over and I was like, wow, I just saw Steely Dan. Like it was wild.
When was that? Recently?
It was, I think July 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 2022 when I saw them. The closest that they were playing to me for this Eagles tour was North Carolina, but I'm in college and stuff, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to see them.
Yeah. I've mentioned this a few times on previous episodes. I'm kicking myself. I probably should have just bit the bullet and spent the money and gone, but I was really like not ready to spend that much money to get halfway decent seats to go and see a 45-minute greatest hits sort of set.
Yeah.
And I'd like the Eagles. I'm not a huge Eagles fan. I don't know that I'd want to sit through a whole show. You know what I mean? So I was kind of like, maybe I'll skip this one, but I just really hope I didn't screw up, and hopefully Donald will come back around with just Steely Dan either over the summer, maybe next year. Hope he's got another couple of tours in him. I think he might.
Yeah, I mean, at this age in his life, any chance to see him is you really got to take it. So I don't know. I'll probably,
Yeah.
as impulsive as I am, I probably would have just spent the, few $100s for some horrible seat just to hear greatest hits.
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry I didn't, but what am I gonna do? So I guess the other question that I had that I was thinking about for you was because we had this kind of funny exchange on Instagram about Two Against Nature. So I'm not a big favorites ranking, kind of person really, especially with Steely Dan, because for me it changes every day. Like I'll just focus on an album or a song for a while, and then I'll sort of get sick of it and switch to something else and then come back. But what are some of your favorites? Like, what were some of the early songs that your godfather played for you, and what were some of the things that kind of drew you to the band, and what have you developed into from there? Like, which songs are currently your favorites to listen to?
Some of the earliest ones, like literally the first, handful of songs I heard from them were Black Cow, Kid Charlemagne, Don't Take Me Alive.
Oh, wow.
Oddly enough, Your Gold Teeth too. That was a song that my goddad really liked. And it's funny in retrospect, that's, pretty interesting because that's a really deep cut.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dirty Work too. I used to love that. Fire in the Hole. But yeah, those were definitely some of the first few that I heard. And when I first heard them, when my goddad he introduced me to them. After that, like I took kind of a break from it. Like I listened to a little bit of it, but like I think a year later I came back and I decided, let me delve into them. Let me check out a few other songs. And, I started listening to a lot of stuff on Can't Buy a Thrill. And I really liked that album. But then I ended up going, to my grandparents' house and I found this CD that they had and they let me have it. It was this, I don't know what album it was, but it was just a random CD that had Steely Dan written on it in marker. And I played it and, Bodhisattva, that's the first song that came on. And, it was crazy. Like, I don't think I had ever felt like a euphoric, experience, induced, from music like that before. So it was really, it was just great. But yeah, Bodhisattva came on, and it went through some other tunes. And then the next day I decided to just go out, sit on the porch, put on my headphones, and I started from Can't Buy a Thrill all the way to the last album. And man, it was, oh my God, it was crazy. And from that listening experience, for sure, Bodhisattva, Green Earrings, and Royal Scam, at least, as far as I can remember, those were the ones that like really stood out and just made me, feel all the chills and stuff. And yeah, and honestly, when I listened to Two Against Nature and Everything Was to Go, I wasn't kind of feeling them that much on the first listen, as I imagine most people, felt. But, like a few years later, I ended up checking it out again because I posted a meme on my Instagram page where it was like this picture of a guy walking and then like he basically stepped in some shit. And when he looked at the bottom of his shoe, it was Two Against Nature on the bottom of his shoe. But yeah, and then after I did that, of course, a lot of people commented saying, "Hey, how dare you do that, et cetera, et cetera." Chris Potter was amazing on there. And I was like, who? And then, after being
Right.
berated horribly by people, I decided to, listen to Two Against Nature a few times and Everything Must Go. I started coming around to it, warming up to it. And eventually I loved it, like at this moment, those are some of the songs on Two Against Nature are some of my favorite dance songs ever. Yeah, but it really is interesting how like your feeling on a certain piece of music can change. Like I had never experienced that before either. Normally I just, listen to music if I don't like it, and it is what it is. But like, genuinely, Two Against Nature, I did not like it at all to begin with. And now I, think it's some of the greatest music I've ever heard. Yeah, but I guess that's my experience with the Dan's really evocative music.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it changes for me all the time because I feel like I'm always hearing new things in the music when I go back and listen. A lot of my listening is done in the car. I commute from New Jersey into Manhattan a few times a week, and I've got a good hour and a half, depending on traffic each way. So, and I don't just listen to Steely Dan, obviously, but if I'm listening and really in the mood to sing along or, do whatever while I'm sitting in traffic, it's usually one of the bands that I turn to. And then when I come home and I'm, working from home on certain days and I've got headphones on and I'm listening to them that way, I'll just pick up a little part in the background that I never noticed before, or I'll pick up some recording nuance, like, something has reverb and it's panned hard right. You know what I mean? Like, well, they didn't use a lot of
Yeah.
reverb, but, bad example, but you know what I mean? Like, I'll just hear something and it just grabs me and I'm like, oh, wow, never noticed that before. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard their whole catalog from front to back. And it just never ceases to amaze me how it sort of always surprises me. I wasn't a big fan of, as you know, of Two Against Nature. When it came out, I wasn't a super Dan fan at that point, but I was sort of turned off by it because I was like, "Oh, this doesn't sound like Steely Dan." It's like some new weird type of thing. Everything Must Go. Definitely, I liked it better when it came out, but those two albums I've really just sort of, shied away from, I think, for a long time because I'm just so into the first ones, the first seven. So, and I was just saying this to somebody yesterday, like, I've come around to Two Against Nature from a songwriting and a musical craft perspective. I'm not a big fan of the recording and the production, but hearing those songs out of that context when they play them live, to me, has just given them a certain something that wasn't there for me before. And I'm really starting to warm up to some of the songs, when you hear them live and they breathe a little bit better, they stretch out a little bit better. They're not so cold and clinical and, dare I say, overproduced. Right.
Yeah, that's a really valid feeling. And I definitely see where you're coming from. I really don't know what to say. Like, I don't know why I didn't really like it to begin with, but love it now. But I do remember when I would first, in my first few listens of Two Against Nature, I kind of felt like it was Steely Dan trying to sound like Steely Dan. That was like my general opinion on it. And I thought it was just like, come on. But, when you actually sit down and follow like, their evolution, from like, of course they ended with Gaucho and then Donald did a bunch of stuff throughout the 80s and 90s. And he slowly transitions into that kind of rhythm based and just straight groove based music, just like Two Against Nature and Everything Must Go, where they just lay down a groove and then they just ride it basically the whole song.
Yeah.
So, and not only in that aspect do I understand it, because, if you pay attention, it's a really, pretty obvious evolution, but, also I just love it. I don't know. Yeah. So you're saying that you still just haven't gotten into that, like, space where you can fully appreciate it. It's just more of a technical appreciation for it still. Is that
I
what you're
think
saying?
so. Yeah. I mean, at least they're, like I said, the album versions of a lot of the songs, they're growing on me because I'm making myself listen to them more, like actually listen to the albums, not just the live cuts of some of the songs. But what's kind of funny is I really love all four of Fagen's solo albums. And you make a great point that he just is very groove based, same kind of production, lower register type parts on the bass, right? And it hits a whole different way from Steely Dan. and it is very similar to the last two albums. So I guess maybe I'm a little hypocritical, but
Yeah,
I
that is
dig
kind
the
of
groove
funny.
stuff. Yeah, and I don't know why. Maybe it's a mental block. Maybe it's because when it came out, I was, like I said, I wasn't a giant Steely Dan fan, but I did love a lot of their music, and I was just turned off by it so much that I think I just sort of have this, thing against it for some reason that I can't shake. But I'm trying. I'm trying to turn it around.
And I hope you
What?
do, because I mean, the more music you enjoy, the better, right?
Oh yeah,
No one wants to hate a song or dislike any particular, piece of music. But yeah, hopefully you come around to it, because it's, like for example, West of Hollywood. I think that's one of their best songs, like at least top five for me.
wow.
Whew, it's that's a track right there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I said, I'm trying to get there. I think I will get there. So with that whole connection to Fagan solo stuff in mind, what are your feelings on Walter's two albums?
Um, you know, uh, I like them. I really like Circus Money. I think that's more accessible than 11 tracks. Of course, I think that's
Yeah.
a pretty agreeable notion. But I like 11 tracks as well. Like, there's a few songs up there, like Hard Up Case, Surf and or Die, Junkie Girl, Down at the Bottom. Of course, that's the summer bop from the album. And then Book of Liars. Yeah, those are definitely the ones I really like the most from that album. Um, but with that being said, overall, I personally find Fagan's stuff to be, not only do I enjoy it more, but I find it to be more just, I guess not necessarily fully thought out, but just more, I don't know. It's just, I just enjoy it more.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm coming from though? Even though I'm not.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. It feels like if you take those two who were like really, joined at the brain, right? And you split them in half, their individual efforts to me are very representative of maybe what their contributions were to the band, right? Where I feel like Donald was the architect in terms of the music and the charts and the parts, and Walter had a part in that too. Not trying to reduce his contribution to the band whatsoever, but I feel like he was more of an idea guy, and I think Donald was the one that took some of those ideas and really developed them and sort of ran them into the ground, right? Until they got to the point where it was perfection as far as they wanted to be able to record something the way that they heard it in their heads. So if you take that sort of dichotomy, if you will, between the two of them, Walter's first record sounds really rough, and it's not, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that was put into it, I'm sure. The production's massive, great musicianship. It's not like, he just got in a room and threw tracks on tape and said, okay, it's an album. But it feels more spontaneous, where everything Fagan did, was very, very calculated and very thought out, like you said.
Yeah, just really well orchestrated, Donald stuff. I mean, for example, what comes to mind at the moment is the Great Pagoda of Fun. I mean, that's like like just playing that in my head. That's such a grand, beautiful composition, uh, especially in comparison to 11 Tracks of Whack as an album. Most of the stuff up there. But yeah, and I don't think it's wrong to even highlight the fact that Donald was the main guy putting together the harmonic framework of a lot of the Dan tunes, because they've talked about that in a few interviews, where Walter's been like, yeah, Donald's he kind of highlights what Donald contributes. And then Donald was like, yeah, I kind of brought in a lot of this, and then we would work on it together. But yeah, I think that just, says it exactly. That's why Donald stuff is more enjoyable, or, just overall more, seemingly more like complex and whatnot. because he's able to really put it all together and whatnot. Whereas Walter, he was definitely a huge part when it comes to the lyrics and whatnot, and adding a lot of stuff to the music. Yeah, I hope that doesn't seem like I'm trying to diminish Walter's part for anyone
No,
listening as
no.
well, too.
Yeah, not at all, and that wasn't my intention either. And it's I just think it is what it is. I think it's how they
Yeah,
work together. And some of the interviews that I've read or listened to over the years where they said just that, and they would even say like it would come down to sometimes Donald would have a whole song, and Walter would change one word, right? Be like, you know what, I don't like this word, change it to this in the chorus, and we're done, right? So, and that's the beauty of it, because who knows what the song would have sounded like without that word, right? I mean, it's one little contribution, one little piece of input can make such a difference that I don't think it diminishes Walter's role if that's all he did in certain cases.
yeah, yeah. It would be fun for it to be true that they contributed an exactly equal amount to everything, but just realistically, that's not going to be possible. So yeah, it just is what it is. But still, Walter was brilliant on his own as well. So that doesn't change anything from that fact.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as a musician, what are some of your favorite musical moments in Steely Dan songs, whether it's a chord change or a drum fill or just anything?
I mean, of course, Asia. That's the honestly kind of a meme now, sort of meme or whatever. But yeah, of course
Oh, I've
that
made a few
drum.
of those.
But yeah, of course that drum sax break and then the drum, stuff at the end. I mean, that's fabulous, just phenomenal. Um, Certainly
And it
the
was one take, right? Wasn't it? Wasn't the
yeah,
drum
the
the drum
drums
solo? He
from
he
what
did
I've
it in
heard,
one
yeah.
take. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that of course. Then I mean, the 4 minute long improvised solo from Chris Potter. I mean, oh Jesus Christ! I mean, you listen to stuff like
Yeah.
that, and it's like, of course, people like Coltrane and whatnot, pioneered a lot of things, paved the way for a lot of guys out now. But, that only makes it easier for people to become some of the greatest in their field, given that things have already been done before. So they're able to build on top of that. And with that being said, I just want to say, like, Chris Potter, I think he's probably like the greatest saxophonist, not only living, but probably one of the best in the last like 100 years, maybe, or I don't know, like several decades in terms of jazz, maybe, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know. It's just, he's just great. Um, but yeah, those two saxophone things are great, of course. I mean, Dr. Wu, that was like a early version of Asia, so to speak, with that whole drum, Picaro and Phil Woods going at it. I mean, beautiful. Uh,
Doctor Wu is one of my favorite all-time Steely Dan songs, and it's funny because I feel like so much of Katie Lied just doesn't make people's lists.
yeah, I mean, Katie lied. I think it's better than Pretzel Logic, but it does have a sort of Pretzel Logic kind of feel in terms of just how quirky it is, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, Doctor Wu, that's a very valid opinion. That's a phenomenal song. I mean, the lyrics, and then on top of that, the music. That's a really beautiful example of just how well the lyrics and music can complement each other. I mean, you got the, I guess, sort of heroin addict story going on, Katie lies and whatnot. And you just got the brilliant harmony and, oh my God.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that whole album was I think my favorite Steely Dan album for a long time, and you said it well that songs maybe don't really fit as an album, but did any besides Asia and maybe Gaucho, did any Dan album have a sort of cohesive theme throughout the whole album? Probably not, right?
yeah. Um, yeah, Asia did. I would say Gaucho for sure. Um, I kind of say Two Against Nature and Everything Must Go. They seem to really have, delve into that loser quote on thing that Steely Dan is known for. You got What a Shame About Me, Gaslighting Abby. I don't know. It's just kind of just goofy little stories about these weird, unfortunate characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I just highlighted like saxophone parts as my favorite moments, but I mean, those are some of the best like things they've done. Not to mention like every single Steely Dan guitar solo is just off the charts, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I think those are really the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, and then I love the kind of synth breakdown in Home at Last. You know what I'm talking about? Where it goes into the horn section and then it just has that really nice synth and it goes back into the groove and oh my God. Whew. That's And then of course, I think Walter does that solo up there. He does
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
the guitar solo.
When it goes into that solo, that's even more it extends the euphoria, Amazing.
Yeah, euphoria is the exact right term. So many of their bridge or middle eight parts are just some of my favorite pieces of the songs, and they could be their own standalone piece of music if they were more fully developed.
Exactly.
So I wonder if in certain cases they just meshed two songs together and said, okay, this isn't a fully formed idea, but here's this one part that would fit perfectly in the middle of this other track. I wonder if they ever sort of did that and married two things together. The middle eight on Green Earrings, I think, is one of my favorite pieces of music ever. I don't know why. It just makes me feel like I'm somewhere else, and I can't even describe what that means necessarily or define where that somewhere else is, but it just lifts me out of my sort of consciousness, if it's not too corny to say, and sort of takes me somewhere. And the lead up into the bridge part where Bernard Purdie just, hits the tom-tom over and over again, and that triple hi-hat hit that he does, my God.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments early on. Like when I first heard that, I was like, hold up. Like I had to rewind it. Oh my God. Whew, just that quick little fill, and then it goes in straight into the solo. I mean, oh my God.
And it's Denny Diaz, right?
Exactly.
And it's the one time, and I asked him this when I was talking to him on Simpson's stream, but it's the one time in Steely Dan, or maybe even God knows his whole guitar playing career, that he bent a note, and he said he only did it because Donald asked him to. Unbelievable.
Oh,
and he's another one that, like, I don't necessarily think people sleep on his guitar skills, but he had such a broad range between playing the early rock stuff with the band and then going into, like, the solo to Your Gold Teeth 2 is one of my favorite pieces of guitar playing ever.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is for many people, I'm sure, but that was just otherworldly.
Yeah. And you were saying, he was you do think he's kind of slept on, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think, if you look at any list of, like, the top 100 guitar players or whatever that ridiculous list that Rolling Stone, I think, or Guitar Player magazine or one of the magazines did last year, it was just like, there are people on there that shouldn't have even been in the top 1,000, in my opinion. But he never makes any of those lists, right? Skunk Baxter gets a lot of love, but I think it's because he carried his career through being on so many other records, and the whole Doobie Brothers part of his career. So I feel like he was a little more mainstream maybe and a little more well known, but I feel like Denny just doesn't get as much love as he should.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that's definitely because Denny, as far as I know, he was only with Steely Dan. Do you know if he was with any other groups after that?
So the band that he was in, and the one that Walter and Donald sort of systematically dismantled, was called Demian, and it was him and I think 2 or 3 other guys from Long Island. And I'm pretty sure I found out about this from Expanding Dan. Jake Malooly does that great newsletter.
Hmm.
I subscribe. I strongly suggest if you're a Dan fan, subscribe. And at this point, there's so much back material to look through and read through and discover that it's great. And he's always coming out with new things. But he put out a newsletter issue, and he did an interview, I think, with the other two guys that were in Demian, and one of them actually had a couple of demos that had Denny on guitar, and Jake published them in the newsletter, so you could listen to it. And the songs were great. I mean, I
Yeah.
really sort of thought they had a lot of potential, and it's funny because it's almost like a could have been, right? Like if those guys had been able to finagle staying in the band, they would have been part of Steely Dan, right? And then I think after Steely Dan, I know Denny did some other session work. I'm not really sure what exactly, but he's been playing with like jazz ensembles and stuff, I think, ever since. And I think he still plays.
Yeah. But yeah, that I think that's why he is kind of slept on, because he was with the Dan, but he didn't really, at least in a mainstream sense, carry on anywhere else. Even though with the Dan, I mean, there's several dozens of songs where he just fucking shreds. Oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
God. I mean, albeit in the bebop style, but still, nevertheless, it's amazing. I mean, yeah, I don't know. He is slept on. It's crazy because he has some of the most, at least some of my favorite guitar solos and just techniques that I've ever heard. And, yeah, I just think it's a matter of just him being not as well known as other people, given that he was, just with the Dan. Um, but yeah, I mean, Denny, definitely, I would say probably my favorite guitarist that was with the Dan. Yeah,
Yeah,
without a
me too.
doubt. Over Larry Carlton, yes. Over Steve Kahn, yes. Even though they have some of my favorite solos, of course, Third World Man, I mean, just beautiful.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's my favorite Larry Carlton solo. To me, it's even better than Kid Charlemagne.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that whole song is just so beautifully and just hauntingly atmospheric. And then just that whole guitar solo at the end, where they just keep going through the same, he's a third world man. It's just, whew, just spooky.
Totally. Um, what was I gonna say? Yeah. So, who are some other musicians that were with Steely Dan and nobody really knows them for other things? I mean, I'm trying to think. Jim Hodder,
Oh yeah.
another person. He was,
Very, very slept on. I mean, over Denny, just incredibly slept on. It's sad, honestly.
yeah, great drummer. You don't realize it until you go back and listen to his playing in the context of the songs, right? And he's never too flashy, but when he needs to bring it, he brings it.
I mean, that whole groove he
Um,
keeps on King of the World is just great.
yeah.
Just. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah. He's
it's just really sad too, given that, well, I don't know what he did after the Dan, honestly. Do you know at all?
I don't know about After the Dam, but he's another one who was in another band that had a little bit of, I think local success maybe before, and it was called the Bead Game, and I think they were out of Boston. I think I'm not sure if it's their album or just a couple of songs that they had. It's on Spotify and online, and you can search for it and find it, and they're actually pretty good. And he was a hell of a singer too, by the
Oh
way.
yeah.
Like
Yeah, I love his voice. It's great. It's great.
yeah. I was just talking to I had my niece on the pod a couple weeks ago, and she grew up liking Steely Dan, partially because of me, but also from her mom who turned me on to Steely Dan, and my older sister, and her favorite Steely Dan song is Midnight Cruiser, and she's a huge Jim Hodder stan, so
Yeah, Jim Hodder, great. Great voice. It's weird, like all the singers that have been, or the people who have sung on Steely Dan songs, all sound great. I mean, I don't think I have to even speak about Donald, but Walter, great voice and very unique as well. Of course, David Palmer, I think he was probably the most singer type of singer, or most vocalist type of singer that's, done lead, if that makes sense. And then Jim Hodder, I mean, really unique voice as well, but just really nice too, had sort of kind of like at least to me, kind of a country sort of twang to it, just
Yeah.
a tad bit, you know. But yeah, like I was saying, it just really sucks, like, especially with Jim, being that he was only with the Dan and of course Beat Game before that, and then just faded into obscurity, sadly. And then I don't know if I think he drowned in a pool. I don't know if that was like the
Yeah.
80s or 90s, but it's just, it's so unfortunate. He
Yeah.
never
He was
got
pretty
his,
young too.
I mean, of course he was big with the Dan, but, he never got his, at least I think, deserved, praise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And he was way too, I mean, nobody's ever not young when they die, right? But it was pretty sad.
Yeah.
Um, and then, who else? I'm just trying to think. It's funny how many people I discovered, how many players that I discovered that I had no idea. And if you start to put the pieces together and you start to follow some of the careers, it kind of blows your mind. People like Elliot Randall and, all of the 18,000 different guitar players that came in and played on Dan records, right? But also just some of the other session people. I mean, obviously Chuck Rainey, Bernard Purdy, hands down the best rhythm section ever on the earth. But even some of the horn players, Paul Griffin, who was an amazing keyboardist. I had to bite my tongue because somebody on Twitter was praising Silent Stranger and saying how great Fagen's piano playing was, and I was like, it's not Fagen. And I
Uh,
was like, all right, don't be that guy, Chad. Don't be
uh,
that guy.
well,
So
actually,
yeah, exactly. Actually, yeah, I didn't go there. I left it alone. I was just happy that somebody that I didn't recognize as a Steely Dan nerd was praising that song, because it's another, sort of more obscure one. But like, if you sort of just go through and follow the careers of some of these players, like the sheer amount of hit records and just amazing albums that they've played on, like Steve Gadd, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and by Paul Simon. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's probably, 50 other records I could name. I just can't think of any of them right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of funny how they got to the point in their careers, Steely Dan, where Walter and Donald and I guess Gary Katz were just like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we can get so-and-so who we love, right? And that's how they came across Wayne Shorter. They loved Wayne, and they just literally cold called him and said, can you come do a sax solo on the song that we're recording? And he was like, who are you? Right.
yeah, the Dan of, opened me up to a lot of things. I mean, for one, just really paying attention to lyrics more, and appreciating lyrics, not only, because of course they're like, at least in my opinion, some of the greatest lyricists ever. But yeah, lyrics, session musicians, because there's been, since I've listened to the Dan and, have made myself, I've kind of, just picked out the different session musicians on their albums. Like, there's been tons of like live, performances on YouTube and just songs where I'm like, hey, wait, I recognize him, or, I recognize that name. Like, it'll be Steve Gadd playing with someone, or it'll be, Larry Carlton on some Joni Mitchell record. I'm like, oh, wow, it's amazing. Like Joe's Sample, for example, when I saw he was on Black Cow, that kind of got me into the Crusaders, and, their fabulous music. But yeah, the Dan have opened me up to a lot of different things within music. Yeah, and it's just crazy how many like hit records and stuff these guys are on, oh my God.
Yeah, and it's opened up a whole world that I didn't even know about, and that's what I love about not just Steely Dan, but even, other artists that use studio musicians, or, just looking at the history of a band from, the 60s, 70s, 80s. And sometimes they would split up and go off in different directions. Then you kind of follow their careers and you're like, oh, I didn't realize so-and-so was in that band, back in the 60s or whatever. So I just love following all the trails and learning along the way.
Yeah. It's funny. It really is just funny, like how much the Dan has opened me up. I mean, like I said, lyrics and session musicians, but also just like in general being into live concert recordings and all that. Like I've watched tons of Dan concert videos, and then not only I'm just interested in, other groups, live performances and whatnot. Because before the Dan, I didn't pay attention to lyrics like that. I just passively, I would say sort of passively listen to music. And I didn't really know who the hell was playing on the record. I just knew the artist's name. And I didn't really look at, live concert videos or anything, But since the Dan, I've just delved, fully into, all the musical aspects of different artists and whatnot. Yeah.
I've never been a big live music fan because I prefer recorded stuff. If I hear a song and I start to love a song or an album, I want to hear it that way. So for some reason, I've just been not totally averse. I mean, I've seen my share of concerts, but I don't kill myself to go see an artist if they're playing near me. Certain ones I would want to go see just to support them and, to hear whatever they're doing. But yeah, since the whole sort of, my own personal Danaissance a few years ago, I've been watching a lot of the videos that have been put up on the different YouTube channels, yours as well as Dan Belcher. And, that guy just has I know. I don't know how he does it, how he finds the time, because all the sort of restoration and all the upsampling he does for all these old videos to make them look and sound as amazing as they do. It's got to take just hours upon hours upon hours. So
yeah, he recently
Dan,
put up recently put up a remaster of the Dan's Detroit, Pine Knob 2000 concert.
I just listened to that.
Oh my God, phenomenal. I mean, when you listen to the one that he just put up and listen to the original, oh my God, it's just, just blows it out of the water,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I just listened to that one, and I forget which other one. I want to say it was the Manassas, Virginia show. I forgot what year it was, but
96,
I forget which one
classic,
was which.
Classic.
Yes, I think it was 96. You're right. And I forget if it was that one because I watched like 3 or 4 in a row over a few days. So forgive me for not knowing which concert it was from. But to see Walter singing Haitian Divorce, which I hadn't come across before in any of the other live shows, I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of those things where Walter sings, different dance songs, I find them kind of, wholesome, but kind of funny, because, admittedly, he doesn't sound that great on all of the stuff he sings. I mean, that's just a fact. Also like him doing Monkey in Your Soul. That was,
yeah.
That was, I don't know how everyone else feels about it, but it was interesting. That's what I'll say.
I hear that. But another highlight of the live shows for me that I wasn't aware was a thing until like probably, 6 months ago was when they let the Danettes take over and sing certain songs, specifically Dirty Work. I don't want to listen to Palmer sing Dirty Work anymore. I just want to hear the Danettes do it now.
I want to hear Donald sing it. That'll be interesting. That would be.
It would be.
It would. I already know it would sound good too. I mean, he has a nice voice, but that would be really interesting. And I also wish he sang Razor Boy, because whenever they perform it, the Danettes sing that too.
Right.
The Danettes are great, of course, but I want to hear Donald sing.
Sure.
Also Maxine too. That's another one that the Danettes sing that I would love to hear Donald do live.
Yeah, I don't know why he doesn't do that one. I mean, there's a lot of stacked harmonies in that song, so maybe he's just letting them.
Yeah, Maxine. That's of course that's reasonable, but like Dirty Work and Razor Boy, like, I don't know. I guess it's just a artistic choice or whatever.
Yeah. Who's your favorite version of the different eras of the live band, if you had to pick one?
No
pressure.
I would say 2000. You know, that whole Ricky Lawson, Tom Barney, of course Michael Linhart, Jim Pugh, uh, and then Bob Shepard and Cornelius on sax, rest in peace.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and then of course they had John Harrington by then. Um, and yeah, I mean that's just my favorite, honestly. And I think it's just like due to some of the songs I've seen them perform when they were in that incarnation compared to the stuff I've seen them perform now. I feel like I've seen a lot more rarities with that group compared to now, where I've just really seen hits for the most part. But
Yeah, he's playing it safe, I think, recently with the set lists and stuff for sure.
yeah, sadly, unfortunately,
I know.
oh
I
my
mean, this is
God.
his chance to I mean,
Like
we had that one rarities night.
you would think that Donald would want to play, more obscure or, less heard stuff compared to, Ricky Don't Lose That Number and Peg and Kid Charlemagne. Jesus Christ.
I know, you would think.
But it was
I
weird though, like
really,
on their previous tour, Earth After Hours, their first show, I think they played Janie Runaway in the middle of the set list
oh
randomly.
wow.
Like that's that was pretty funny because it's like they were just playing hits. Everything else on that set list was normal, and in the middle of it, it's just Janie Runaway. Like what? I would have loved to be at that show.
Yeah, it is a random song to just slap in the middle of some of the other ones.
And they also did a
If
Goodbye Look and Goodbye Look during that tour. I forgot what show, but he sprinkled a little like really rare stuff, but just a little bit of it here and there.
I would have loved to have seen that, and I really am sad that I didn't get to see them at the Beacon when they were doing the album night shows and the rarities night, which, thankfully again we have video and of most of that thanks to, I guess that's a Dan Belcher thing too, right? It's one of his videos. The one and only time we've heard Second Arrangement live, and I think it's the only performance at the Bear too, right?
They performed the Bear a few times.
Have they?
Rarities Night. I know they did it at the Greek Theater once. I think 2009 or sometime, but yeah.
So favorite unreleased Gaucho track, if you had to pick one.
uh, mm, Maybe off the top of my head, I would say the Bear. Is it fine if I pull up the list real quick?
Yeah, oh, of course, absolutely.
But yeah, I would kind of just say the Bear. Because I mean, that groove on its own is just so, snappy and punchy. I mean, you wouldn't expect no less, honestly, but it's,
And I'm assuming you just obviously heard the full band version of Can't Write Home About You that they just released.
yeah, that's, speaking of, where I get my sources, someone emailed that to me, like a month ago.
Oh,
And then I guess Steve Kahn eventually put it on his website or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that is great.
I'd only ever heard it in a stripped down form, I guess, on one of the Lost Gaucho tapes or whatever that's been circulating forever. There was like just a piano and vocal sort of rough demo of it. But hearing the full band version just blew me away. I was like, wow.
Yeah, it really adds a whole lot to it. There's some Dan songs, like some of those Brill Building early demos where it's like, oh, they sound nice and, really intimate, when they're really stripped down. But like stuff like Can't Write Home About You, when you hear the full group and just, what they can add to the song, I mean, it just, takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would probably say The Bear is my favorite Lost Gaucho track.
Yeah, that's
that
fair.
or maybe Second Arrangement, but probably The Bear.
I love Second Arrangement. Something in that song I just connect with. The Bear too. The Bear has that groove that's just sort of, unimpeachable. But Second Arrangement, for some reason, when even before it officially came out last year, obviously we all had the original bootlegs of it, and it just always, for some reason, just resonated with me, that track.
Yeah, I didn't like it that much, before, the more higher quality versions came out. But, I would say over the last like year and a half, I, came around to it, and I do really like it now. But, I still do think The Bear is probably my favorite, Los Gaucho track. Or I don't know if it would be my favorite Los Gaucho track, but I really do love the lyrics on, Were You Blind That Day?
Yes.
Really, really raw. And I mean, Donald's voice is really raw as well, which is it's great,
Yeah, I wonder what led him to redo the lyrics and I mean, obviously had to redo the vocal track with the new lyrics, but like, I wonder what drove that decision. Maybe it was just sort of the stress of Gaucho in general,
Yeah, but even then, Third World Man, it's beautifully, just quick and simple. And there's only a few short lines, but it gets to the point, and the music is just so atmospheric enough to where it just, it sells the whole theme that they're trying to, put out there. Really effective,
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about the extremely slow version that's on Alive in America of Third World Man?
I like it. I feel like it adds a little more to that atmospheric piece that you're talking about. Like, it takes it in a different direction a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I like when they reinterpret songs, and the other thing, what's the song that I was just thinking about? There's a song. Oh, was it "Sign In Stranger" where he changes the lyrics in the bridge?
Well, I think do they change it or do they just add? I know they have some different lyrics.
He changes it, I think, in a couple of the live shows. And I was, again, didn't know this was a thing. And then I was just watching it, one day, and I was like, huh, what'd he say?
Yeah, something about a lucky star, I think, or I don't know, something, but
yeah,
it is interesting.
And do you like the slowed down version of Third World Man?
Yeah, I like it. I used to think it was just pretty silly to slow it down that much because it's extremely slowed down. But
right.
I do like it, I do think it kind of slightly adds to that menacing vibe and stuff. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, is there anything else you wanted to cover or talk about? We covered a lot of Dan ground, but is there anything else on your mind?
I just thought about this. It's not just an exclusively Dan podcast.
It's not, but you know what?
I think I'm just so used to talking about the Dan so much that I forgot that other music exists.
It definitely leans that way because I've cultivated a lot of my guest hosts from my Memes of the Dan Instagram page. So obviously most of the people that are sort of raising their hands and saying, hey, I'd like to come on, or the people that I specifically asked to come on, like yourself, have been like, we connected over Steely Dan, so it just makes sense. But I have other episodes. I have things, somehow Steely Dan always works its way into the conversation, but it's not exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all feel this way, of course, but and it's weird because, like, of course it is a subjective, feeling. It's my opinion, but like, it's unreal how just brilliant, Donald and Walter are. Man, I mean, I don't know. That's all I have to say. It's just, I don't know. Just every time I think about it, it just blows my mind. Just how complex but accessible and just really poetic their lyrics are, and of course the complex and harmonic music. I don't know, it's just otherworldly, honestly. Man,
there's sort of a mystique around them too, which I think adds to it, at least for me. That they're like these inscrutable guys, and if you read all the interviews, they were just like eating up reporters for sport, because 70s and even I guess the 70s was really just so much fluff going on in the world of music and the world of rock that I think they just didn't have time, and I just read a really funny story where when they went to London, I guess they played sick and holed up in a hotel suite, the two of them, and you could only get into the suite. It was like one of those hotels where you had to have like a specific key or key card to get to that area of the hotel. And they didn't give anybody the key. So it was just the two of them, and they wouldn't talk to anybody for like a week when they were in London doing press. They would go out, do their, press stop or whatever, come back to the room and then just like sequester themselves so they didn't have to like, I guess, interact or whatever. I'm probably getting the story halfway wrong, but it was just hilarious to me that they would do that.
Yeah. Two big goofballs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's honestly even funnier just how much they crack each other up, and just the interviews you watch where like one of them will say some quirky line and the other will kind of fall over just chuckling or whatever. It's really wholesome,
Yeah.
I think
they definitely had a special bond.
They certainly find each other funnier than we could ever find them,
For sure.
But yeah, what are some of your favorite artists?
So besides Steely Dan, wow, I really like Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and Lloyd Cole's solo work. I love Buffalo Tom. I love Smashing Pumpkins. I love Led Zeppelin. Saint Etienne, who's a British band that you wouldn't think I'd be into, but I've loved them since they came out, and I guess the late '80s, early '90s was their first record. A lot of the classics, and like the Joni Mitchell and sort of the singer songwriters, Billy Joel. But I listen to a lot of stuff, and it's hard for me to kind of pigeonhole favorites really. But those are some of the ones that I keep going back to. Oh, Prefab Sprout, another brilliant band. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all.
I only know
you would probably like them.
Yeah, I was gonna say I only know probably like 3 of the artists you named.
I'm gonna have to get you into Prefab Sprout and maybe Lloyd Cole. It's not in the same playing field as Steely Dan, but very well-crafted, complex music with very literate lyrics, right? Like it's, I mean, I hate to use this word, but sophistopop is sort of what they've, I guess, been retconned into being called, which I hate that term, but I said it. But I really think, and I find that people that like Steely Dan like Prefab Sprout at least, and Lloyd Cole sort of on the side too. So I'll send you I'll make you a playlist or something. Okay. You should definitely check them both out. I have Phil actually. I'm recording with Phil. I've been on his pod twice, but he's going to come on this on Sunday. And we're going to talk about albums other than Steely Dan for a change. And, he sent me his list of like 3 or 4 just, classic albums that he wants to talk about. And I sent him back Prefab Sprout. My favorite album, I think their best album is called Steve McQueen, and Lloyd Cole and the Commotions' first album, which is called Rattlesnakes. And those are the 2 that I want to talk about. So I sent them to him and he listened to them and he was like, oh, I never even knew these existed. These are great. So trying to get people into that.
That's cool. Are you into any I guess, just pulling from the Dan, are you into any like jazz or stuff like that? Or?
Oh yeah, for sure. Since I played saxophone as a kid, early on, I got into Coltrane. That led me to Miles Davis and Cannonball Adderley and, Louis Armstrong. I mean, I was a big horn kid. Like I was really into horn players. I love Miles. Miles is one of my favorite artists, I think. I'm not a complete nut where I know every track and everything in his discography, but I know him when I hear him and he had some of his weird eras, right? But my favorite sort of era of Miles is, probably the 55 to 60-ish, like the quintet years. Just brilliant stuff that came out of that. You can't see, I actually just rearranged my room, but I have a poster of Miles on my wall to my left. So.
Yeah. Okay. And so no, you said you got into the jazz stuff through saxophone, really? Or?
Yeah. So when I was in 8th grade, I played in jazz band, stage band, and marching band. Marching band, we obviously did marching band stuff, but like stage band and jazz band, we did. My music teachers at the time were cool, and this was 1984. I'm really dating myself, but they would bring in stuff that was on the radio, because we, the kids, wanted to play that stuff because, we didn't just want to do this, old guy music, right? So we did the theme from Ghostbusters with a band arrangement. We did Material Girl by Madonna, a few others that I can't think of, but sort of peppered into there were some classic jazz tunes, and some of those escape me too. I remember one song that I love to play that we did in jazz band called "Asleep in Class." I don't think it's like a standard or a classic, but just this great song where the sax section and the trumpets would trade off lines and stuff, and it was a fun song to play. So it got me into that mindset, even as like a 12 or 13-year-old kid. And that kind of followed me through high school and even into young adulthood, where I started to get into, a lot of jazz stuff.
Wow. Mm. Well, yeah, I would probably say just hearing you speak, I'm probably at the same, level of jazz knowledge as you. I like a lot of different things, but I'm not like I wouldn't say I'm an aficionado. Like, I don't know, oh yeah, that album came out on that label and that year, and oh yeah, I love when this whole group was together. I'm not as that knowledgeable. But yeah, I like a lot of jazz, and I would say, I guess being into the Dan has introduced me to a bit more than I knew before. But yeah, like you, I listen to everything for the most part. It really just depends on the song, honestly. I don't really have a specific genre or genres that I'm not into or into, yeah.
Same.
And I think that, that's why I like Frank Zappa so much, because, that's
he defies genre classification.
he defies music, honestly. But yeah, so yeah, speaking of some of my favorite artists, Zappa has climbed up there over the last like 2 years or so. Of course, the Dan, and then I normally say Stevie Wonder is like right up there in the top, yeah. My top favorite ever. Just like Steely Dan, I just think Stevie Wonder is just like, otherworldly in terms of just his composition, and his lyrics are great as well. I would say the Dan has probably some of my favorite lyrics ever, but Stevie Wonder has some really great stuff as well. Probably like second to the Dan for me. And then Frank Zappa, I would say more so the music. His lyrics are fine, but
his lyrics get kooky, but that's by design.
I don't really care for the lyrics much, but the composition is just next level. It's just all three of them. They just have some sort of brilliance that I can't even describe or fully explain why I like it so much. But it's just great.
Yeah, it's just a level of genius. And Zappa, by the way, another one who I don't know, I don't know that much about his recording stuff and his album recording process, but I know he had a lot of influential people in and out of his different incarnations of his band. I don't know if they were like session people or just, members of the band for a short time or whatever. But if you look back on like, Steve Vai, Mike Keneally, who's another amazing guitar player, these guys all cut their teeth with, as young kids, really like playing with Zappa.
And George Duke, too. Who else? Another artist I really like.
Oh, yeah, right. George Duke, Terry Bozzio, the drummer, probably, if you're a drummer or if you know drums, you're not sleeping on Terry Bozzio, but most people don't even know who the hell he is, right? Or they just knew him from the Missing Persons band in the 80s, which I love. People hate on that band, but, whatever. But he's another one that just was sort of like this breeding ground for just brilliance with the people that he played with, because I think he, like Steely Dan, he really demanded excellence from people and, playing their parts. Like he would call them on the carpet if they were playing, a note wrong or, were a little bit off key or, whatever the case may be. I think he was like a harsh taskmaster.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I might have a thing for, really strong dictators, musical dictators or something. I don't know if you've heard the story about how they used to call Donald Mother in the studio. Did you hear about that at all?
Nope.
I first heard about it. I heard about it from other things later, but there was this interview on this podcast episode with Gary Katz on Spotify. I think it's Bob Lafette's podcast or whatever. But, Gary Katz, he goes to a bunch of different things, and he speaks about how they used to call Donald mother in the studio or whatever. And I just thought that was hilarious. I think that really goes to show, just, I guess, how much he ran things, at least to an extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess I just love really tightly put together music in general. Because there's a lot of things like, well, now, the music now, it is what it is. But for the most part, I'm not into a lot of, I would say, the mainstream stuff now, because there's a lot of, brilliant people, out now that I'm really into. But a lot of the mainstream stuff, I just personally don't like. I guess that's just, I don't know, I guess I'm just weird, because you would think someone my age would be into the, contemporary scene, but I'm pretty out of the loop, honestly.
I mean, I'm pretty out of the loop too, just because I'm an old guy. But my daughter, who's 18, has been keeping me in the loop a little bit, and she and I will trade off some music. I can't get her into the dance, so I'm just trying to subversively slip some of that music into her world. But so far it hasn't worked. But we'll see. But other than her non-attraction to Steely Dan, she has really great taste in music. And, I can't take credit for all of it. I'll take credit for some because, I played her stuff when she was little and, she likes some of the same artists. But she's been slowly the last 3 or 4 years, like really, she'll come to me and say, hey, check this song out. I think you're going to like it. Or we'll be in the car, driving someplace and, she'll put her Spotify on and hit a playlist and I'll hear something that I just like. And I'm like, who's this? And she's like, oh, that's Biba Doobie. Right. Or that's Mitski or who's the other one that I really love the song. The song is called Doomsday, Lizzie McAlpine. That is a fantastic song. I listened to that song on purpose more than I probably would care to admit, but it's brilliant, right? So I mean, like I'm getting to like some of the stuff that my kid's into, which is fun because it's just something we can connect on. But yeah, to your point, like for the most part, anything the last 10 years, like there's maybe 3 or 4 artists that I like that have come out, but for the most part, it's not really my thing.
And I think it's just like I have to find artists that are unique and stuff that I enjoy that are out now. I have to dig deeper, past the most of the mainstream, stuff. Because there's artists out now like this brilliant saxophonist and composer named Kamasi Washington. He has some really great records out. And similarly to that, there's this duo called I think it's Domi and JD Beck or JD Beck. Yeah, Domi and JD Beck. It's this female keyboardist and then this male drummer, and they just make some really progressive sort of jazz kind of drum and bass fusion type of stuff. I don't know how to describe it. But their debut album, they released that I think 2 years ago, and they had Snoop Dogg up there, Herbie Hancock, this artist named Mac DeMarco, and it's really great. It's I don't know, it's some really good stuff. But yeah, and I would say also Kendrick Lamar. I recently, let's say like the last year and a half or so, got into him, but mainly his album called To Pimp a Butterfly. That's
Yes.
really varied album, eclectic, with some brilliant, compositions up there. But yeah, for the most part, I have to really, dig and find the artists that are doing different things compared to the, mainstream reverb heaven pop stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're out there. They're out there, and I've been discovering them, not just from my daughter, but from Spotify, really, and just from sort of combing through things on the internet, one of the things, I don't know if you saw it, I did it on my Instagram, but I've also done it on my Twitter account, where I'll just ask people for recommendations. If I'm just bored and don't feel like, listening to the same shit that I've been listening to, I'll just say, hey, I have to go to the city tomorrow. I have an hour and a half in the car. Throw me a song that you love right now. And so many people are cool enough to reply and be like, hey, check this song out, or listen to this song. I mean, unfortunately on Instagram, it was all my Steely Dan nerds. So they're like, play Gaucho. And I'm like, oh, play Gaucho like every damn day. No. Right?
Yeah, I saw some of the replies to your story question. I think it was today or yesterday, but it was a lot of Steely Dan stuff.
Yeah, and Phil puts Limp Bizkit, and I'm like, just go away. No. But yeah, like the people on Twitter, like it's my Twitter account's not 100% Steely Dan focused, although that's mainly what I post about and interact a lot with. So I got a lot of interesting recommendations from there. And then I was just telling somebody else this, but what I like about Spotify is I'll listen to a playlist, maybe has 20, 30 songs on it. And, at the end, it'll just start to shuffle up stuff that it thinks is related that you might like. And sometimes it sucks, but sometimes it'll be like something that I've never heard before, and it pops up a song and I'm like, ooh, what's this? So I'll listen to it a little bit more, get it into my head and see if I like it. And then I'll just go ahead and add it to one of my playlists, right? So I've been doing a lot of that, just capturing songs from different sources and just throwing them. I have like a random catch-all kind of playlist that I use. Oh, and by the way, speaking of playlists, the one you sent me was like, and just
by the way,
most well-organized, biggest playlist I think I've ever seen of somebody's favorites.
That's literally just my like songs playlist on Spotify. Whenever I like a song and click the heart button, it just goes on there.
Yeah.
I literally don't have any other playlists. Well, I think I have like a few others that have like 2 or 3 songs on it because I just didn't finish it. But, really, if I like a song, I just click like on it. And, whenever I feel like it, I'll just shuffle the like songs playlist and just listen to everything, Yeah. But yeah, I know it's a big ass playlist.
Mine wasn't near. I obviously have the like song playlist too, and I can't think of how many songs are on there. It's probably close to 5,000, if not a little over. But the one that I sent you back, and by the way, thanks for making me, because Spotify does the obvious end of the year playlist, like, your top songs, 2018, 2019, 2020, whatever. I just really started to use Spotify in a big way and started paying for premium back in 2017. So my Spotify sort of, algorithm only goes back that far. So what I did last year was I was like, okay, I've been on here for just over 5 years. I took all of your top songs playlists from each year and I ran them through this thing online called Smarter Playlists. And Smarter Playlist is this website where you can hook it up to your Spotify account, and it's almost like a drag and drop programmatic kind of builder. Oops, hit the microphone, which is sort of super nerdy, but that's me. So what I did was I dragged all of my top songs playlists into this thing, had it alternate songs from start to finish on each playlist, because that way they'd be sort of in order, of how much I played them or liked them during the year for each year. And then I ran it through, they have a dedupe function, right? So that way, obviously, I wouldn't have the same songs 10 times. So I did that, came out with like little under 500 songs. And then after I traded playlists with you, I was like, shit, I keep forgetting to put 2023 in there, and it's, already March. So I went in a couple of days ago and peppered in 2023 and then reran the whole thing and spit it back out again. It didn't change a whole lot, but there are a few new entries in there. So I've been doing that, and that's what I'll do. If I'm bored, I'll throw that on and hit shuffle, because at least I know it's, the last 5 or 6 years worth of stuff that I really like.
Yeah, it's great how many, songs and albums that I've come to love through Spotify. Like, Spotify has been a huge catalyst in my, evolution through music listening or whatever, and taste in general. Just a bunch of like underground, so to speak, or just, obscure groups and albums or songs and whatnot. It's great. Some of my, I would say kind of some of my favorite albums have been recommended by Spotify. Sure, that Kendrick Lamar album, To Pimp a Butterfly, that got recommended up there a while ago. And man, just in my opinion, a masterpiece. But yeah, it's great. I love Spotify. Thank you, Spotify.
Yes, thank you, Spotify. Great. Well, listen, Zamauri, it has been fantastic speaking with you. Thanks so much for coming on. And, maybe there'll be a part two. We'll have to pick up where we left off and talk again.
Yeah, I would love to do a part two. This actually went pretty quick to me. Um,
Me too. I just looked down and realized it's almost an hour and a half, which
yeah,
is fine. Definitely, we covered a lot of great ground. So thanks again for coming on. And any parting words?
um, you know, I love music. Everyone, music is so
Me too.
close to my heart. And R.I.P. Jim Beard. You were a great one.
Oh, I know.
So
Oh
sad and
man.
sudden. Really
Yeah.
unfortunate. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. My pleasure.